Hey guys, so I want to go over the air brakes, touch on some of the more common questions that you may come across when testing at the DMV. So, first question, excessive use of service brakes result in overheating, which can lead to expansion of the brake drums. The air brake system for a straight truck or bus should not leak at a rate of more than how many PSI per minute with the engine off and the brake released or the brake off. And that is going to be 2 PSI. If the brake was on, it would be 3 PSI per minute. If air pressure does not build up to normal within the correct amount of time, your air pressure may drop too low during driving, requiring an emergency stop. If you must make an emergency stop, you should brake so that you can steer, allows your truck to stay in a straight line, allows you to turn if it becomes necessary. The proper method of braking when going down long and or steep grades after selecting the proper gear is to brake until your speed is about 5 miles below your safe speed and then releasing the brakes. Your truck or bus has a dual air brake system. If a low air pressure warning comes on for more than one system, what should you do? You're going to stop, safely park, continue only after the system's been fixed. A professional driver must be able to see a warning before air pressure in the service air tanks fall below, and that's going to be 60 PSI. The brake pedal in an air brake system controls the air pressure applied to put on the brakes. The parking or emergency brake on a heavy vehicle can only be held in position by something that cannot leak away, like spring pressure. Before driving a truck or bus with a dual air brake system, the pressure in each system should be at least how many PSI? And that's going to be 100 PSI. The brake system that applies and releases the brakes when the driver uses the brake pedal is the service brake system. To check the free play of manual slack adjusters on S-cam brakes, you should park on level ground, chock the wheels, and release the parking brake so you can move the slack adjusters. If your truck or bus has dual parking control valves, you can use pressure from a separate tank to release the spring emergency brakes to move a short distance. Under normal conditions, to engage the parking brakes, the driver must first let the air out of the air brake system. The air compressor governor controls when air is pumped into the air tanks. Total stopping distance for vehicles with air brakes is longer than that for vehicles with hydraulic brakes due to brake lag distance. Some air brake systems have an alcohol evaporator. What may happen if you do not keep the unit filled with alcohol? Ice may form in the air storage tanks and cause the brakes to fail. What is emergency stab braking? It's when you brake as hard as you can, release the brakes when the wheels lock, and reapply the brakes again when the wheels start rolling. How should you check that your service brakes are working properly? Wait for normal air pressure, release the parking brake, move the truck forward slowly, about 5 miles per hour, and apply the brake pedal firmly. When is it not a proper time to apply the parking brake? When you come down a steep grade and your brakes are very hot, or if the brakes are very wet in freezing temperatures. How should you check that the trailer brakes come on when air pressure in the system drops below a certain level? Chock the wheels, apply the parking brake, shut the engine off, and pump the brake pedal to reduce air tank pressure. Truck and bus parking or emergency brakes must be held on by mechanical force. which is your spring brakes. You should know your brakes are fading when you have to put more pressure on the brake pedal to control speed on a downgrade. What is emergency controlled braking? When you apply the brakes as hard as you can without locking the wheels. And just to kind of go over that, with controlled braking, you're going to brake as hard as you can without locking the wheels. On stab braking, you're going to put your brakes on as hard as you can until the wheels lock and then release the brakes. Your air brake systems are in good condition. The compressor should start pumping at about 100 psi. The braking power of the spring brakes depends on the service brakes being in adjustment. In air brake vehicles, the parking brakes should be applied anytime the vehicle's parked. With the exception if your brakes are hot, you're going to want to let them cool off. If the spring brakes are on, when should you press the brake pedal? Never. The most common type of foundation brake found on heavy vehicles is the S-cam drum. If your truck's air compressor has its own oil supply, when should you first check the oil level? Before driving. You're on a steep downgrade. You've reached your safe speed of 40 miles per hour. You would apply the service brakes until your speed drops to... Okay, so your safe speed is 40 miles per hour. You're going to drop it 5 miles below that. So you want to drop it down to 35 miles per hour. If your truck has a dual air system and one of those systems is low on pressure, either the front or the rear brakes will not be fully operational. Repeatedly pressing and releasing or fanning the brake pedal may result in the loss of brake air pressure. The air brake lag distance at 55 miles per hour on dry pavement adds about 32 feet to your stopping distance. The air loss rate for a straight truck or bus with the engine off and the brakes on should not be more than 3 psi in 1 minute. Again, if the brakes were off, that would be 2 psi. With the brakes on and you're putting pressure on it, it's going to be 3 psi. The stoplight switch does what? Turns on the brake lights to warn drivers behind you. A truck with air brakes going 55 miles per hour would require a stopping distance of more than 300 feet. If your vehicle has an alcohol evaporator, it's there to reduce the risk of ice and air brake valves during cold weather. The most important thing to do when a low air pressure warning comes on is to stop and safely park as soon as possible while you can still control the brakes. The application pressure gauge shows how much air pressure you are applying to the brakes. When you apply the brakes shoes or linings are pressed against the brake drum or disc. The use of air brakes on a downgrade is only supplement to the braking effect of the engine. Your truck has a properly functioning dual air brake system and minimum size air tanks. The pressure should build from 85 to 100 psi within how many seconds? And that's going to be 45 seconds. And did you know all air brake equipped vehicles have an air supply pressure gauge connected to the air tank? The air compressor should stop pumping at about 125. And the safety valve is usually set to reduce air pressure at 150 psi. So it's going to start pumping at 100, stop at 125, and start releasing pressure at 150. During normal driving, spring brakes are usually held back by air pressure. Okay, and that's just some of the highlights of air brakes. Again, as I say with all the videos, it's very important you read that manual. All right, have a great night.